Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. Assalamu alaikum. Welcome to NEWSROOM. I'm your host, Omar Khalid. But today is the 16th of January 2024, and these are the stories that we will be highlighting during the course of the show. We'll begin with the day 102 of the war between Israel and Gaza, and of course all the different activities that are happening on the sidelines, whether it be on the diplomatic front, whether it be the reactions also coming because of the strikes by the Houthis, and then of course the reaction that comes from the West, and so many countries that are trying to call for peace conferences, just like China. But will it all yield some kind of benefit as far as this conflict is concerned? The United Nations is saying time and again, we've heard Antonio Guterres say it various times that we need to go for a ceasefire, but Israel is in no mood for a ceasefire, and nor are its backers supposedly. They're only just saying that you need to do your whatever machinations or mechanisms that you are employing as far as your brutalities are concerned in a more surgical manner. So do the same thing, but do it a bit differently. What is the military strategy as far as Israel is concerned in Gaza? We'll be discussing that and more in our first segment. In our second story, ladies and gentlemen, we will be talking about AI, artificial intelligence. We've talked about many a times as far as this is concerned, but the use of artificial intelligence and social media has also crept into Pakistan. And with the elections in Pakistan that are going to happen next month, how is the AI and social media going to influence the voting patterns amongst the different segments of the society? If we look at the social media, there are certain political parties that gain a lot of prominence through social media and the social media gatherings, conferences, and even the use of AI. But will other political parties bow down to the AI as well due to the AI phenomenon, and will they do the needful? What kind of repercussions will they have? But at the same time, how will be able to decipher what is true and what is not, what is information and what is disinformation, even on the political front? This will be part of our second story, the use of AI and social media in general elections in Pakistan. Then we are going to talk about Donald Trump. Yes, we are talking about Donald Trump again. Why? Because he has won the Iowa caucus. He has cemented his Republican frontrunner status as he bids to take the White House this year, that is 2024. He beat former U.S. Ambassador to the UN, Nikki Haley, and Florida Governor Ron DeSantis in a widely expected result. On Monday, that took him, of course, a step closer to securing a third consecutive nomination for his presidency. A very important development as far as the Republicans versus Democrats, and of course, Trump versus Biden is concerned. Then we'll be talking about a report that comes from the Oxfam that says that poverty inequality across the world is exploding, with the rich holding a disproportionate amount of global wealth while the already vulnerable are getting fewer resources. In other words, the rich are getting richer and the poor are getting poorer. We are seeing many examples of that, and especially since COVID began and after COVID, we are seeing more rampant polarization as far as this divide is concerned. We're going to highlight that in our last story of the day. Let's begin with our first, and that concerns Palestine's and Israel's war and the day 102 of that war, that conflict that is going on. And of course, what has happened as far as the Houthis are concerned, the reaction is concerned, then the strikes on Iraq by Iran are concerned, and of course, UN agencies appealing for faster, safer aid access to Gaza as the population faces famine and the rapid spread of disease that the United Nations has said time and time again. But apparently all of that is going to deaf ears. We've been joined by Brigadier Retired Mohammad Zeeshan, Senior Analyst in the studios, to discuss more about that. Thank you very much, Brigadier Saab, to have joined us.
Thank you.
It's wonderful to see you in the studios. Let's begin with the Houthis. They hit a US cargo vessel, and of course, this is what the US military has said, and they say that this has heightened the volatility that was already present in the region. But this volatility in the region, Brigadier Saab, with due reverence, wasn't it started by the West themselves? Wasn't it started by Israel themselves? And is the casualty rate higher due to the strikes by Israel rather than the strikes by the Houthis? I'd just like to have a comparison as far as that is concerned.
Thank you, Omar, for inviting me on a very important subject. I would begin by explaining that what the phrase we use for the war in Middle East, that war in Gaza. Now, when you write the title or the caption war in Gaza, so it is restricted to 365 square kilometers of a strip Gaza Strip. However, as you have highlighted, the issue has expanded around the region, and Houthis are the biggest force to reckon with, which have taken an aggressive and active step to create a kind of a pressure on Israel in particular and generally the Western countries, that they want to use the strategic location of Yemen, which is at Bab Mandab, which is the entry or an exit of Red Sea from Arabian Sea or the Indian Ocean, and they want to exert their military power in the naval context in order to create that influence in support of the Palestinians and in support of the Gaza. Now, as you said that who is responsible, who is creating a volatility in the region, the Middle East, that debate will go back many years, and I would, certainly not. I would not like to get into that history. Most of the people understand that history, but at the moment, we should understand that other than Houthis, Middle East has certain power centers: Saudi Arabia, UAE, Iran, Egypt. Now, these countries have no appetite for conflict. They do not want that this conflict of Gaza should expand in any form to a level where they are also embroiled in it. Just to highlight that the ceasefire has happened between Kingdom of Saudi Arabia and Yemeni forces, which are primarily Houthis. Saudi Arabia would not like to destabilize its southern borders by creating a situation where Houthis come against Saudi Arabia on any context, on any reason. Iran similarly has not shown any kind of appetite for expansion of this military conflict. So, as the Western media highlights or identifies that war on Gaza or war in Gaza, this Houthi issue is linked with it, but it may not have the potential to flare up the whole region into a conflict kind of a situation.
Contrary to what Israel is doing, basically.
Contrary to what Israel is doing. However, there are certain non-state actors who reside and have refuge in Iraq, in Syria. Those non-state actors may be involving into this conflict, and already there is one Harakatul, I'm forgetting the name, it is based in Iraq. This outfit, which is militant and extremist, they have taken up arms against Israeli forces, and Hezbollah, which is normally not covered by Western media especially, is in regular conflict with Israeli forces from the Lebanese side, the northern Israel. So within this context, what we can see is that conflict points may be created, like at the mouth of Red Sea, Bab Mandab, by Houthis, or there may be other conflict points bordering Israel. But in my opinion, it does not have the potential to spread like fire.
All right. Now, speaking of strategies, Israeli attacks, as far as the latest details go, have continued overnight across Gaza. 132 Palestinians have been killed in the last 24 hours. I'd like to understand, what is the Israeli military strategy as far as Gaza is concerned, or to some extent the West Bank, because we are now seeing more and more raids in the West Bank as well, people getting arrested and some people getting killed.
If we see the Gaza Strip, it can be defined into three distinct parts. One is the north, which is the Gaza city, one in the center, and one is in the south, which is Khan Yunis, and then further south, Ramallah. Now, if we see the three parts of Gaza Strip, north, center, and south, Israeli military operations were initiated by airstrikes, missile strikes. Those were spread all over but concentrated on the north. North is supposed to have the best infrastructure, military infrastructure of Hamas. Now, and Hamas incursions into Israel on 7th of October, they also took place from the same area.
Okay.
So, the major concentration of airstrikes also, and then subsequently the ground offensive of the IDF, Israeli Defense Forces, has been towards the north. That's the Gaza city. Now, if we see the map which is being given, that which areas of the northern Gaza are under control of IDF. So, other than the very center of the Gaza city, rest in the north, in the east and south is controlled by Israelis. They have not gone towards the beach side, which is on the west. However, they have very effectively blocked the northern Gaza or the whole Gaza Strip from the sea, which is the western side of the Gaza Strip. Then there are sizable incursions in the south, which is north and east of Khan Yunis. The point here to understand is that Khan Yunis and Gaza City were the strongholds of Hamas, and it is perceived that they have the best and most rugged military infrastructure, like communication tunnels, hideouts, their ammunition dumps, etc. Their communication infrastructure, the satellite and wireless communication infrastructures, they were all in the north, Gaza City and Khan Yunis, maybe Khan Yunis. But the point to understand is that what they have done is they have created a situation for Hamas where they are squeezed for space. When they are squeezed of space and they are not, they do not have freedom of movement in order to have good supporting activities, militant activities against the attacks or the incursions of Israeli Defense Forces. So then what happens that the Hamas militants or Hamas forces are divided into certain pockets, and then it becomes easier for the aggressor, which are the Israelis at the moment, to handle them. So they are denying them to use they are denying Hamas the use of their infrastructure available to them within the Gaza Strip. They have divided them in a way where they are squeezed, and then they now can easily target, because when you are squeezed, you have to move. When you have to move,
I can understand this strategy, but at what expense? 24,285 people have been killed in Gaza alone, whereas 61,154 have been wounded since all of this began. You say they're trying to squeeze the Hamas. How many are the Hamas? Are there not these 24,285 people who've lost their lives? I don't think a huge percentage of those were belonging to any organization whatsoever. They were mostly civilians, women, children, and they say that more than 10,000 children have been killed by the Israelis. At the same time, what I'd like to understand, because we were talking about Israel, a poll that has been published by a non-partisan Israel Democracy Institute on the 2nd of January this year shows 15% of Israelis want Netanyahu to remain in office after the war, in line with previous surveys that have shown that the popularity is sharply down in the past as well. But there is a huge dissent that is operating from within Israel against Netanyahu, political and non-political alike. Do you feel this war is a means for Netanyahu's sustenance?
Excellent question. Before 7th October, Netanyahu was barely surviving on one seat in majority within the Israeli parliament. And for months, it was always being discussed in Israeli media that he can go anytime. He can go anytime, vote of no confidence, and different things were happening there. The conflict gave him a life. But mind you one thing, if we see the history of Israeli politics, after Yom Kippur War, the strongest ever Prime Minister of Israel had to resign, Golda Meir. And similarly, the same fate awaits Benjamin Netanyahu. He may prolong the war to survive, to sustain himself, but at the end, he would be the first political casualty within the Israeli politics. So that's the writing on the wall. It may take weeks, months, but not very far.
The Qatari foreign minister is in Davos. We all know that the World Economic Forum is going on, but also this is a forum where people talk about a lot of important happenings that include this war between Israel and Palestine. He has said that for the first time we see disagreement and controversy over the call for a ceasefire, quote unquote. Do you feel that the forum can be used to come to some kind of resolution to this regard? I'm talking with respect to a ceasefire.
I would go a step further. I think a day or 2 days before, President Biden of United States was addressing a gathering, and there was, people were sloganeering against the US support of Israel in this context. And he was forced to say that we are into a quiet diplomacy and we are trying to convince Israelis to conclude this military operation as soon as possible because of the loss of human life and humanitarian issues which are coming out of it. What the Qatari foreign minister has said is something to be highlighted at Davos. Why Davos? Davos is the economic forum, and economic forum are all affected by the conflicts. What has happened in the Red Sea by Houthis has seriously affected. As I said earlier, that the major power centers of Middle East are not interested in getting into this conflict directly or indirectly. They are not interested because of the economic cost. And recently, Saudi Arabia has manned fences or is trying to mend fences with the Houthi-dominated Yemeni government. However, the economic forums are such practical forums which can create pressure on the political leadership that see if this does not subside. Today, we don't find change in oil prices or commodity prices which are faring through Red Sea and Suez Canal. But if it escalates, even because of non-state actors, you can, have airstrikes within, the deserts of Iraq and Syria. You can launch airstrikes and missile strikes against Houthis, but you cannot dismantle their military infrastructure and ability to respond in any way unless you take boots on ground.
True.
When you get into that situation where you have to go take boots on ground, and that's a different ball game. That's cost. And that cost is not only for the countries which are taking the boots on ground, it is for the whole region which is bordering the conflict zones. It is for the shipping lines, sea lines of communication. The most important sea line of the communication is through Red Sea and Suez Canal.
Yeah, I totally agree with you, Brigadier Sahab, and I think that economy is that little pinch that hits hard those countries that are involved right now in this conflict from the Israeli side, directly or indirectly. So let's see how that happens. Let's also hope for some kind of a de-escalation, as the United Nations and Antonio Guterres have been pointing out time and again. We're a bit short of time. Thank you very much, Brigadier Sahab, to have come all the way and to have joined us for this very important segment and to discuss strategy with me, because you understand strategy much better than I do. So it was also for our viewers to understand how the different parties are moving forward. Thank you very much, sir.
Thank you.
Let's come to our second story, ladies and gentlemen, and that concerns the use of artificial intelligence and social media as far as the elections in Pakistan are concerned. While the use of artificial intelligence could be or maybe would be cost effective for social media and all the teams of the different political parties that could use it, but the fact remains that the implications could be negative, could be troubling as far as the broader outlook of all of it is concerned. with Pakistan that is heading into the elections in a couple of weeks' time, I mean in less than a month's time, and of course this is the month of February, political parties are, and I'm sure, tempted to push this envelope and explore different ways to wage the technology's recent intrusion into politics. A lot of parties have tried to use this one way or the other, artificial intelligence or conferences on social media platforms, but how should the use on social media be constructive? Can it be also used through AI for disinformation purposes, for the benefit of certain sectors in the political parties? That and more is going to be discussed in our second segment. We've been joined by Asad Baig. He's the Executive Director of Media Matters for Democracy, and he's right here with us in the studios. Thank you, Asad, to have joined us. Long time coming, you as a guest in the studios, but better late than never. Let's begin without further ado. Promotional images, songs that are created on the basis of artificial intelligence, AI voice cloning, image editing tools. Do you feel digital politics is the new campaigning tool as far as politicking is concerned in Pakistan, for example?
That's a very interesting question. And I think the closest to Pakistan in this region is Bangladesh. Let's take the Bangladeshi example. They've recently had elections. I'm sure everybody in Pakistan has heard about it. And the way disinformation, specifically AI-generated disinformation, has been used in the campaign, it's unprecedented. There were videos, AI-generated videos of international channels, say for instance CNN or XYZ, and the anchors, which were, by the way, artificially intelligent figures and so on, they were generated through AI. They were claiming that the riots in Bangladesh are caused by the funding from the US and so on and so forth, all kinds of conspiracy theories, which obviously were not true. And same goes for the speeches that were coming, or not coming for that matter, from the opposing political leaders. And we've seen that happen. In the US, the elections are about to happen soon, and the Biden administration, they formed a specific cell to deal only with the AI-generated disinformation. So this tells you that the amount of the intensity of disinformation that we are talking about, specifically the AI-powered or deep fake, as we call it, it's the implications are very, very serious. In Pakistan, we've seen one party opening the can of worms, and this is exactly the terminology I used when I saw that there was a deep fake, quote unquote, generated video of a particular leader on the television. It's great if there's creative ways of promoting expression and so on, but the flip side is, next time when something like that comes on the social media, who's to prove what is real and what is not? The video can be anything from an incitement to violent speech or a blasphemy allegation, for that matter, on a certain individual. How will you fact check that? How will you counter that? Specifically when we are living in a very low information literacy environment. So these are all the factors, Omar, that I feel that perhaps make us a society which is susceptible to falling for AI-powered disinformation, specifically if it's political in nature.
Are the political parties going to push the envelope with respect to digital media this time?
I think so, because digital media is a very important phenomenon. More importantly, we are seeing a lot of traffic, a lot of kind of new trends on the social media platform as opposed to the digital media, because digital media is specifically is usually referred to as the journalism media, whereas social media, as we refer it to, is the larger platforms like TikTok, for instance. One very important phenomenon, which reminds me, which was not present in 2018 elections. I was observing 2018 elections and the hate campaigns online in the previous elections also, but phenomena, TikTok was not there, and this time it's there. I personally, I really like TikTok because of the fact that a lot of people who can't read or write can actually post content and access it. And for the first time users internet that people are connecting to in Pakistan, they actually end up on TikTok. Great. But on the flip side, that it brings us to an environment where the information is so rampant and it's coming with such an intense speed and frequency that it's almost impossible to fact check and regulate, right? And we've seen this happen with platforms like Facebook, for instance. Facebook Papers tells us in India, a lot of anti-Muslim hate speech it completely went unregulated.
Are there any implications you feel, Asad, as far as the use of AI for the general public is concerned, for the voter or the influencer or those who are being influenced?
Look, frankly speaking, usually when we talk about the dangers, people think that we are demonizing AI for no reason. Generative AI has many, many, many uses, Omar. And obviously anyone from using ChatGPT for writing any kind of content to journalists using OpenAI for data analysis and conducting data-based investigations for stories. Anyone would agree with me that generative AI has massive positive implications as well. But since we are specifically talking about AI-powered disinformation, then we have to say that most likely I see the kind of resistance and the kind of political polarization we see in Pakistan at this point in time. I will not be surprised if political groups or political parties actually resort to create
more of that
polarization by using and leveraging AI for creating disinformation.
So that also you talked about ChatGPT. I'd like to refer to OpenAI that is going to launch an different anti-disinformation tools for the 2024 elections. That is maybe for the US, but can that be used for Pakistan?
Here's the thing. I'm frankly speaking not a very big fan of AI-powered fact-checking tools for one reason alone, because it might work in US because of the language, but since we have Urdu as the official language of Pakistan, and similarly in a lot of other regions we have a lot of local languages which are actually used on the platforms. Probably also one of the biggest reasons why regulating hate speech is such a difficult task for companies like Facebook and so on, because the sheer diversity of the narratives and so on.
And the languages as well.
And the languages. I feel it's like oversimplification of a certain task. Unless there is some human intervention involved in the AI processes, I feel fact-checking will probably not be possible by AI alone. But the good news is that there are a lot of international and local tools which are coming up in the market to actually enable more a better production of credible information. And I feel at this point in time there is one need that we need to cater to, Omar, and that's empowering the mainstream credible newsrooms. I can't emphasize on it enough. Because they have been disempowered, as we see across the world, not just in Pakistan. They have been disempowered because of their revenue shifts, because of a lot of other changes in the newsroom. So where let's say 4 people were doing a job, now there is one person trying to fit in for those 4 people. And in that environment, I feel the newsrooms are susceptible themselves, let alone anybody else. Newsrooms are susceptible for disinformation, to falling for disinformation. And it's our job as civil society leaders.
But we've seen so many examples of that in private media in Pakistan as well, where they've taken up stories that were not based, that were not fact-checked, and then the disclaimer came a bit later in the day.
Exactly, I'm saying, Omar, but frankly, I won't really blame them because the kind of resources or lack thereof they have, it's a miracle that they're operating in the first place, right? So, and that's where I'm saying, organizations like us, Media Matters, for instance, I think it's a prime job to further empower the newsrooms in fighting with disinformation, political disinformation that can potentially harm the masses in Pakistan.
All right. Speaking of disinformation, risk specialists have predicted that misinformation has been a likely factor to trigger a global crisis in the next couple of years. This was said at the World Economic Forum in a report, that is the World Economic Forum Global Risks Report 2024 that has been released recently. And it talks about the widespread results of misinformation and disinformation. Can't there be any means to counter it in your point of view?
Oh, this is an interesting question. By the way, this is the second time World Economic Forum has done that. I think the first time it was in 2017 when they came up and identified misinformation as one of the global risks to human society across the world, obviously. So it's very important. I think there can't be one strategy alone. There has to be a number of strategies working together to counter such kind of risks. For instance, one thing I can tell you with confidence that some companies and technologists are working with, for instance, specifically in terms of countering digital disinformation based on videos and photos, is to give a digital signature to each of the video and photo content. It's kind of like how the notes work, for instance, and the notary number works on your currency bills, right? So you can identify each currency item with their notary number. And similarly, the idea is that original video content can be identified and will be identified by their digital signature. And if there is any tampering or if there's fake content without a digital signature, they can be also identified in that way. So things like that. Strategies will have to work together. But I feel, Omar, the biggest responsibility whether we like it or not, the biggest responsibility falls on the shoulders of people who call themselves journalists and work in the newsroom, because they are the real information gatekeepers, as they're supposed to be. And I think probably they have the most to lose when it comes
but you know, when it comes to journalism, just look at the online journalism. Every second person who has no basic knowledge of it has now become one on social media, thanks to YouTube, thanks to Twitter, and thanks to so many, TikTok, for example.
Exactly why
we've
I'm
got a
ranting about
plethora of so-called journalists that are giving all kinds of dis and misinformation.
Exactly why I'm ranting about it, Omar, because that is polluting the information landscape and the information integrity. And when that happens, who gets affected the most? The people who are producing credible content. And I think that's a big question that we need to raise for all the credible newsrooms across the country in Pakistan, that do you want to operate in a space where people do not trust the information, no matter who's coming up with it?
That is true. That is true. Asad, the PTA says in November 2023 there are 126 million broadband users and 129 million broadband internet users, which is 54% of the population. The Election Commission of Pakistan has for the first time extended the code of conduct for the national elections to digital media and social media influencers as well. But will they comply?
It's very interesting. So I have to yet to see this code of conduct, but generally I feel ECP is probably not very well placed when it comes to implementation or enforcement of such code of conduct, because for that to happen, you probably need to have a cohesive or extensive monitoring of the platforms, right? And without that, I feel it's probably more of a statement than anything else, number one. And more important issue that perhaps I would like ECP to do the next time around, this time obviously it won't be possible. In 2018, by the way, I also raised it, that there also needs to be a cap on the social media spending of the political parties, because that's a non-transparent issue. A social media cell, quote unquote, can be built by any political party or their supporters without any transparency mechanism, which kind of comes under the ECP's domain of monitoring information. So in theory, any amount of money can be spent on campaign without actually ECP finding out, whereas they will monitor the billboards and the other kinds of campaigns and so on. So digital campaigns are no different. In many countries, digital campaigns are the campaigns in real, right? In the US, for instance, like I said, Biden government has investing a lot in countering disinformation. They have a whole cell on countering disinformation, AI-based disinformation. Similarly, I think in Pakistan, the time has come that we take the digital mediums and social media platforms seriously when it comes to information consumption. Probably the next time around, ECP should also have some kind of enforcement mechanisms to cap the spending of political parties in terms of digital campaign also.
True, Asad, but there's another thing that we need to also tackle, and that is digital illiteracy. A lot of people might be illiterate, but they are digitally illiterate as far as here is concerned. I have talked to so many people. Do you feel it's important to conduct digital literacy workshops in universities, in schools, in colleges, in the small cities, big cities, and the villages as well, for people to ascertain and understand how to use it and how to distinguish true from fake?
Look, I think this is perhaps the most important thing that we need to do. I can tell you by experience, my organization, Media Matters, we've been conducting newsroom trainings for journalists. We've trained 5,000 journalists in the past 4 or 5 years across the country, starting all the way from Gilgit to Karachi. But we simply don't have enough resources when it comes to the masses. No civil society organization probably will have enough resources other than the governments, right? So I think it's very important. There needs to be a cohesive approach towards it by the inclusion of MIL curriculums, for instance, in early childhood education or middle education or primary education and so on, in the universities also. But I feel that probably this is quite low in the list of priorities when it comes to the priorities of the government and so on. For whatever reason, I can't understand why though, Omar, because this is extremely, like you pointed out, it's extremely important. And this is also, by the way, one of the proven and the most effective ways of countering misinformation by educating people, by kind of making them more immune, so to speak, to the political or any kind of disinformation for that matter. And I'll give you a case scenario very quickly. In 2020, we did all sorts of research. We have been doing research on media trust as well. All our research show that the media trust in Pakistan was elevated by about 20 to 25%. And it went to about 65%, excuse me, for the first time ever that I know. And the reason was because people were perhaps very, they were very happy with the whole coverage and so on. And because the coverage was being done very, very professionally, using the official sources from WHO, countering misinformation, there were campaigns on the television about education and so on and so forth. And that trust went down again when the COVID went away and so on. So this kind of shows you that this is extremely important, and information credibility is linked with the trust in the media. And like I said, newsrooms do not want to be in an environment where people don't trust the information in the public spaces.
Also you talked about journalists being the guardians as far as fact-checking is concerned. But for example, concerning us in state media, we check and recheck and counter-check before we talk about any story, especially also in our programs. But what about the other different media outlets that are there? Do you feel there's any mechanism that they are putting into place? Has anybody talked to you or consulted you as far as fact-checking is concerned, and how important it is when we are just a few weeks away from the elections, and it needs is one or two fake stories to build a huge storm?
In the past 1 year, I've personally trained about 14 newsrooms across the country, and all the leading mainstream newsrooms as well. And I can tell you for sure that all of the newsrooms, all of the people in the newsrooms, they're very much concerned, about disinformation. Number one. They very much want to counter it. They want to be in a space where the journalists that they work with are and can effectively counter misinformation. And in fact, all of them, they want to, among other things, want to create credible informational content that will serve the purpose, which is creating journalism and so on, right? But again, the pressures and by pressures, I mean specifically the changes that the newsrooms have went through in the past 5-6 years. Transitional changes, like the changes in revenue, for instance. Digital revenue is increasing, television revenue is going down. The resources are a massive, and this is why exactly what I'm saying, right? Because usually we talk about organizations like us, and various others, they talk about fact-checking. Even Facebook and other platforms are funding fact-checking initiatives. But what they're not talking about is the sustainability of these initiatives. And this is what my concern is, that if we, let's say elections are coming, everybody is concerned about disinformation. We are working with newsrooms great around elections. And probably 3 months after elections, we won't even care about it. You see what I mean, right? Because if we were concerned about elections, we did a few trainings, we got out of it and so on. The newsrooms will still be there. They'll probably have the same problems that they had 1 year ago or 3 months ago and so on. Sustainability is the key when it comes to fact-checking initiatives. And but in general, I feel the people who are running credible newsrooms across the country, they are incredible people, and it's a miracle that they are still doing what they're doing. At the odds with all the factors, including the resources and the drop in the revenues that we see happening in Pakistan and elsewhere as well in the world. So yeah, in general, I think it's a universal problem in the country, and everybody is worried about it, and everybody wants to play their own part in countering misinformation. Yes.
Last question, I want a very short answer to that because we're short of time.
Sure.
We've talked about this polarization that has crept up in the country, and we're seeing a lot of division, especially on social media, and we see this within societies and within political circles as well. But then with the elections that are about to happen, a lot of people could misuse AI to further widen that gap, that political or that societal gap as far as polarization is concerned. How can we tackle it? What are the 2 or 3 important steps that a layman can also use in order to understand, this is deliberately being created in order to create hatred or create disinformation?
So very quickly, 2 or 3 steps. One, whenever you consume information, and this is for the your viewers, whenever they consume information, they need to understand that internet is rife with misinformation content. Do not believe everything you say. Make sure that you consume the information from a source, and I'm not talking about a random website or a propaganda YouTuber. I'm talking about a credible media house. Whenever you consume information from them, make sure that you trust the source and you've investigated that this is actually the source that you're investigating, consuming the information from. Check the date, check the source, check the location, check whether or not that video or audio or whatever that you're consuming is relevant. Is it new? Is it old? Is it being regurgitated? And so on. And finally, make sure that before you react, before you share, before you do anything on whatever you're consuming, make sure that you're 100% positive that content is real. Otherwise, it's just going to be embarrassment for you if you share something, it turns out to be false. Among other things, it's going to be embarrassment for you. So I would say save yourself from embarrassment and try and make sure that whatever you believe, whatever you read, whatever you consume, it's authentic news.
But for that, we have to be digitally literate as well, because the number of disinformation that even I receive through WhatsApp groups is astounding, to say the least.
Yeah.
People just forward things without even fact checking whether this information is correct or not correct, or even articles that are written, even if they are AI generated, whether they're correct or not correct. I think we're entering an age where we need to be more cognizant and more aware of what is happening around us and what we are being given and fed, especially on social media. Thank you very much, Asad Baig, Media Matters for Democracy, to have joined us, to have talked to us about this very, very important subject that has really polarized society such as ours, and we need to be, understand the complexities of what is social media and how to use it properly for the benefit of the society. Thank you very much to have joined us. Let's come to our last two stories very quickly. The first concerns Donald Trump, who has won the Iowa caucuses and now is cementing his front-runner status as far as the 2024 presidential elections are concerned. He might be a bit closer as far as securing his third consecutive nomination for the Republican Party for the presidential slot is concerned. He won at least 20 of 40 delegates, with DeSantis taking 8 and Nikki Haley receiving 7. Provisional tallies have shown this, with US media outlets calling the statewide contest about 30 minutes after the start of voting. Also, biotech startup founder Mr. Vivek Ramaswamy, who had won 2 delegates, announced as the results came in that he was quitting the race and is going to endorse Trump. A lot of things are moving forward as far as Donald Trump is concerned, and it seems as if after the Iowa caucuses that there is a lot of hope, let's put it that way, quote unquote, for Donald Trump as a candidate for the Republicans. How that will bode in the future is that only time will tell. But of course, the elections are coming year and year as far as the US is concerned, and in many other states as well. Finally, there is a report that has come from Oxfam at the World Economic Forum that talks about the widening gap between the rich and the poor. It says why the world's 5 richest people have bagged more wealth as poverty gap widens. They have talked about billionaires like Jeff Bezos, who have seen their worth double after COVID-19. And of course global inflation. Despite that, there's a widening gap. They talk about multiple crises that lead to rich getting richer, the poor getting poorer. They talk about what is in fact driving the inequality. There are different mechanisms, different factors that they pondered, whether it be the pandemic that has widened that gap, whether it be the other factors, absence of progressive taxation or the new wealth being generated, and so on and so forth. Also, where they talk about whether there is a solution to this widening gap, and herein they say that higher taxes are one way to redistribute concentrated wealth and close the inequality gap, because the wealthier are getting more wealthier and they're not paying their taxes accordingly. This is of course a global problem, and that needs to be tackled globally as well. With that, we come to an end of today's newsroom. We'll see you inshallah tomorrow with new story segments that pertain to us in Pakistan. Stay safe. Allah Hafiz.